Right. Good morning, colleagues. I'm here this morning live at the Corona Coffee House, and I'm happy to introduce Sandy Wilcox, who's going to tell us some about her equine-assisted psychotherapy practice. So, Sandy, I come into this interview knowing a little bit about you, and having heard you speak briefly before, and so I know therapy, being a therapist, is your third career, I believe. So I was wondering if you would quickly walk us through your other careers and maybe sort of explain the transition through those careers and how you arrived at becoming a therapist.
Okay. All right. Great. My first career was a special ed teacher, and this was back in the 70s. So I would have some of my students would go to special ed type camps for special kids, what they call special needs now. And they would come back and they would be more verbal, and they would be more confident, and I could tell that there was a difference in their posture, and I just kept hearing about it. I never went to any of the camps or anything, but I would see the results, and it was really neat. I grew up in Austin, and I had horses when I was a kid, but my dad was like an old farm boy. He wasn't an equestrian. He had grown up with horses just out on a farm. So it was like kick hard and hang on. So, not all those things that I had to unlearn as an adult. So then the special ed, would see kids doing that. Then I became, I started working in the church as a youth director. And so then I would go to camp, and I'd take kids to camps that had horses, and I would just see the interaction with the kids, between the children and the horses, and then I became a pastor. So I went to camp a lot. That was just one of my favorite things to do. And I remember one young man, his mom died about 3 weeks before we went to camp, and he was out in the arena talking to this horse, and the counselors luckily gave him time to go do that. And the horse, and it wasn't just projection, it was like the horse dropped his head, and he was like he was listening. He was like he was right there with this young man. And this young guy couldn't really talk to too many people, but he could talk to that horse, And so that was something in the back of my mind, was that I kept hearing about equine therapy and stuff. And had that experience, or those experiences with the kids and the horses, and I was like, this is something I'd like to do. So I hit a place in my life where I sold some property, and so I had some extra funds and was ready to take a sabbatical from the church. And my background for my personal, when I would do continuing education, was Jungian. I would go with Jungian analysts, and we would travel, and we'd go to Greece, and we'd study Greek mythology, or we'd study Isis, and we'd go to Egypt. And I had taken a class at Pacifica. It was called Psyche in the Sacred, Lionel Corbett, and so it was such a wonderful, magical place, and it was just, all the archetypal stuff. My background as a pastor is, doing a lot of interpretive, metaphorical work, and symbols, and so just when I had some extra money, had some extra time, and it was like, okay. My therapist said, what would you do if you just let yourself go do what you really want to do? And I was in my 50s. I was divorced. And I said, I'd like to go back to Pacifica and take some classes, and I'd like to do equine therapy. And it was like, oh, and that just sort of popped up. But it was like, that had been cooking for decades. So that's what I did. I went back to school. I flew out to Santa Barbara, and went blonde. I'm not a natural blonde, by the way. I'm a California girl now. And then I wrote my thesis on the equine therapy. So as I was researching my thesis, I went to different trainings. So I went to a workshop, and then I did the training to become certified. So I'm certified through EGALA, just Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association, and I looked at some different groups and organizations that do the training, and this one I really gravitate to. It just seems the most professional. It's There's a code of ethics. You go back every 2 years. You're required to have so many hours. You have 20 hours every 2 years of continuing education in equine therapy. You're always with a partner. So even the people that are like you they're trained in psychology and in equestrian, that are experts in both, you still wouldn't do it by yourself. You still would have you would pick one of those roles when you're with a client. You would pick one of those roles and you would have a partner to do the other role. And I really appreciate that. And the work is on the ground, so it's not riding. So it's really clear that this is about relationship, that it's not about controlling the horse. It's not about riding. It's not about doing things right and wrong. Once you get in the saddle, there's right and wrong ways to put your feet and put your head and where you put your hands and how you hold the reins and stuff. And when you're on the ground, there's no right or wrong. It's what's the relationship, what's going on in the arena. It's like we were talking a while ago. Everything in the arena is up for grabs for talking about. And as Becky, and then as I was doing my training, Becky and I met in the training stuff, and so we decided to partner. So she has the horses in Elgin, and then I'm the mental health person, and she's the equine specialist. She was mostly trained through Frank Bell is her background, but she's become more and more natural horsemanship, which really fits with our work because it's so. Non-pressure. It's very relational. We really follow the horse's body language and what's going on with them, and that helps so much with the clients to really. The horses mirror so much of what's going on with them psychically, and it just gives them immediate feedback. And so as the years have gone on, Becky and I have been working together now since 2010. It's almost 6 years.
Goodness,
yeah. Sure. And if you'd like to read my thesis, I can send that to you sometime. It was really fun to do the Jungian stuff as I worked on my thesis because I wrote about equine therapy, and then I looked at the archetypes of equines in mythology, and then I took it kind of for myself. So like my own dreams, just the symbology that came up for me and the insights that came up for me about my own, family of origin and my own life. That whole thing about that my dad had taught me about hang on and kick hard. I realized I had taken into all my relationships with, usually with men, but, off in other things too. So I would hang on to jobs that, weren't working for me anymore and keep kicking, just make it work, and it was like there's times when you have to turn loose and when you have to just, move on.
The embodiment of that phrase, no use in beating a dead horse.
Exactly, yeah. So then this year, Becky and I partner with a nonprofit, and we got a grant to work with veterans. So we are working with veterans who are in transition. So we call it Transitions, Horses, and Heroes. And so we're working, some weeks we have like 2 or 3 days or evenings that we're seeing clients. And it's mostly, it's for people in transition, and so as I'm learning a lot about the military. And so I'm using the archetypes, so I take my Pegasus, and they love Chiron. He's the wounded healer, and the figurine that I have for the Chiron he's a warrior. He was and so they love him. I take my Trojan horse, and we talk about the archetype of the trickster and how we sabotage ourselves. The Trojan horse, it was their own hubris that messed them up, and they let him in, so let him inside, and then they.
That was their demise.
Yeah, that was their demise. So we talk a lot about that. So I just mix it all up. If we need to have a little theology, I throw a little theology in, and it's a fun place to be. So,
You had maybe touched on this, but I wanted to ask it as a sort of a clear question. There are all sorts of, what do I want to say? There are all sorts of different approaches that we can add to what you would think of as, traditional talk psychotherapy. There's sand tray, there's play therapy, there's art therapy, there's, music therapy. So in your case, why the horse?
well, I also use sand tray, being with the depth psychology. So I do dream work, and I have my clients bring in all those kind of things, and their jewelry that they make and their poetry and stuff. So I like to use the imaginal. I just and I think some of this comes back to my background as a special ed teacher. It's like we learn the most through touch and doing things and interacting. That's where we learn and we remember. That's where it gets embodied, is the things that we learn about ourselves. So I think that's where that comes from for me. Is like the talking. I love to talk. That's not a problem at all. And it's funny because, and Becky and I in our work together, she's more the introvert, and I'm the extrovert. But when she's with the horses, she talks more because she gets into a kind of a teacher role. And so as we have worked together, we have gotten quieter and quieter. We really try to. And the good thing about working with a partner is you can physically move your partner and say, okay, let's let the horses do their work. And then the horses, what I've learned really is, they're herd animals and they're prey animals, and so they're so relational, and they're already about keeping yourself safe. They're already about boundaries, which is such a huge thing in counseling. Is letting people know that it's okay and it's healthy to have boundaries. You've got to have boundaries. It might be the most important thing. And horses are pretty clear about making their space and getting their needs met and being relational, and they just have a way. And then it's so motivational. People so want to be in relationship with the horses. They want to touch them. They want to talk to them. They want to lead them around. Even people that are kind of scared of them. We sometimes when we have groups and we encourage them, we'll say, okay, if you've got one or two people that don't want, everybody's always optional if someone doesn't want to do an activity, and but they always do. And then usually we'll have somebody that'll say, well, I'm scared of horses, or I really don't want to do this. So then we have activities for them too, to observe. We give them specific questions and specific things that they're going to do. We make them definitely a part of the processing, and they always end up in the arena after like one or two, exercises or something. They're in there. So there's something very attractive. We also work with donkeys, and people really want to mess with the donkeys and the donkeys are just so, donkeys. They're just they got that little donkey energy, and they're little, they're cute, and then they just there are yoga masters. They really know. They push exactly the right the right buttons. So they're our best. They're our best. Yeah.
Well, Sandy, again, these questions were drafted with a little bit that I knew about you, so I had asked a question about EAGALA, but I think really you've answered that. I was just going to ask, what are your thoughts on training models and different methods out there? What are your thoughts on EAGALA, being EAGALA certified, and what are your thoughts beyond EAGALA? But I really think you kind of covered all of that already.
It's very professional, and I really appreciate that. And they give us very specific things to watch for, so we're not just out there trying to get people to talk. It's really, we look for shifts and patterns. One of the most powerful things that I don't think we would have ever thought of if we hadn't done the EAGALA training is looking for unique or unusual things that happen and that the horse does. And it's almost every session one or two of the Becky's horses will do something that they've never done before, or something that's unusual, like the alpha horse, like the head horse of the herd in that moment will touch noses with little old lady horse that nobody ever pays any attention to, and all of a sudden, it's like these two don't have relationship, but they're touching noses right next to a client, or doing something strange. And then they do emphasize our counter transference, and I think that's really important. They really emphasize keeping it clean. So keeping our own counter transference, our own assumptions, keeping mindful of that, and really keeping quiet about that, not throwing that out there all the time. Really
Sure.
letting clients have their relationship with the horses.
You're kind of hitting on a question that I almost included but decided to omit, but
What's
now
that?
I will bring it. Well,
Sure.
there are lots of people, quote unquote, in this industry that don't come from any formalized mental health background. I think most would agree, by and large, that still people are getting something from that.
Sure.
But
of course.
I think as mental health professionals, we might also agree that such circumstances maybe lend themselves to harm being done. So sort of as a broad, across the industry sort of question, what are your thoughts on practitioners without any formalized, mental health education or background being practitioners?
Well, first of all, it's illegal for them to call themselves therapists or saying they're doing therapy. If
Well, as
for
I understand
one
it,
thing.
they couldn't advertise themselves as having one flavor of license or another, but that anyone
Yeah.
could say, I'm an equine assisted therapist, come to my facility and engage in equine assisted therapy. For example, just as an example, there is no licensing body in Texas that license psychotherapists. So you couldn't say I'm a licensed professional counselor and not have a license. You'd get in a world of trouble. You couldn't say I'm a
Right.
licensed clinical social worker
Right.
and not be a licensed clinical social worker. You'd get in a world of trouble. And the same is true with psychologists, clinical psychologists. But therapist or even psychotherapist is a broad term for which there is no licensing body.
Right. Right.
So there are lots of equine assisted therapy
Therapies.
programs that exist.
We saw it even when we were applying for because we had to go to the state. We got our grant through the Texas Veterans Commission. So we had to do a 5-minute presentation, and we saw all these other groups, and we were like, we knew some of these people that are doing this. Like, they're not. There's no therapist. There's no
Right.
LPC person or anything that's involved in it, but they call it therapy. So they have some kind of. That's why I like EGALA is that you have to have a licensed mental health person on the team. That's just part of
Part of the
deal.
prerequisite.
Right. And you have to go back for your CEUs, and the equine specialists have to do that too. They have to go back too. So I just think it's an ethical thing.
Right. Congratulations, by the way, on your program's grant from the Veterans Association.
Yeah.
What other directions are you hoping to head in your practice, or what goals are you setting, if any, or just what would you, look at the next 5 years? What are you hoping to have?
Well, we'd love to
happen?
keep doing this. We've put
Let me
in a
ask-
lot of
I'm
time.
gonna ask a very
Yeah.
therapist question.
Okay, go ahead.
In a perfect world, 5 years from now,
If you had a
if you
magic
wake up
wand.
in the morning, still a equine assisted psychotherapist, what would that look like?
Well, I will have already had my knees replaced. That's the hardest part is I was a jogger, and then I went to California and I jogged up and down mountains during breaks, so I ruined my knees. So we would like some things we would like to do. Some populations that we would like to work with is eating disorder in young women. I would like to do more with women and horses. I think there's a lot there for young women to learn. And then the eating disorder is a special interest of Becky's, and so that's something we've been putting our feelers out into different organizations in the community. So that's kind of our next step. But I'm enjoying the military. We really shied away, and it was like, okay, everybody says well, you have to know a lot about the military, and there's so much language,
Sure.
and they rattle off all those acronyms
Yeah.
like 90. But we work with and again, Becky and I really, ethics is such a high priority. So we have a peer veteran who is a young man who was in Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq. And he's gone through training, and he's been in a lot of therapy himself, so he's gone through a lot of his own healing, so a lot of self-discovery on his own. He loves the work, and so he's always there. So he acts as sort of he's sort of an interpreter, and he also gives us cred. Because I hear that working with military, that's such a big deal. Is if you're not military, they don't want to listen to you. But Brian really helps give us credibility.
Belong to a different herd.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So probably continue to do the military thing. We're looking at that.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Sort of as a closing question, and it's kind of broad, is, equine-assisted psychotherapy is I guess I would say a corner, a section of the psychotherapy industry that's gaining some footing. It's growing, it's going places. So in your assessment and your valuation, where's the industry heading, and what sort of things, as the industry progresses and grows, what sort of things would you like to see happen within the industry?
Well, I think, like we were talking about the ethical piece, I think seeing, how to put this, but making it more professional-minded, that it's not just, I have horses, I'll have people come out and ride horses, and, I think really making it, does that make sense?
Yes.
Making it more professional. Really being mindful of the ethics and the training, and more about normative kind of thing. I like I said, obviously I really like the EAGALA model. I really think that's important. They're doing more. I know they're doing more with like insurance and that kind of thing, and insurance companies, that kind of thing. I think it's seen more as a profession. I think it's seen. I'm really stuttering right now. I'm like putting it together.
It's a viable treatment modality.
There you go. Thank you. There's the words.
Well, as I understand it, the more evidence-based it can come through research, then the greater likelihood is that it becomes expandingly reimbursable from third-party payers, insurance companies.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on research within this modality, and would you ever want to be involved in research, or do you have
We kind of are.
unlaid research plans?
Well, no, not necessarily, but I know when I was writing my thesis, there was hardly anything out there. So the stuff that I used was more animal-assisted therapy and just experiential therapy. But there's since that was in 2010, and since then there's so much neurological studies that are being done and stuff. So it's very exciting what's happening that way. So I'm hoping that there's going to be more of that. With our grant, we have to do a lot of give them a lot of statistics, showing. Which is tricky to try to show how much improvement it is, because we don't have giant numbers for one thing. The other piece for us is the veterans. We're realizing don't, like I said, there's that whole credibility, and trust. That they, we give them a PTSD pre-test and post-test. And what we're realizing is that the pre-test, they just sort of check. They'll go through and check and say, oh yeah, everything's pretty fine, it's fine. And then the second time, they're telling us how much it's helped them, how they're sleeping more, they're more relaxed, their relationships are changing. They're telling us verbally, it's in the narrative. And so then I think what happens is in the post-test, then they're much more honest with us because they trust us. So it's tricky to do that
Skewing
kind
the
of,
numbers
yeah,
and making it look like they're
actually getting worse. So, and we've been doing this for 6 months, so it's like, okay, we're still trying to figure out how that's going to work. So it's tricky to do it. But I think the neurological studies and things, I think that's where it's really gonna hit the road, where it's like, okay, this is where the rubber hits the road.
Right.
Like, seeing changes.
All right. Well, Sandy, I don't really have any other formal questions, but invite you to close with whatever thoughts or additional, anything you'd like to add.
Well, I'm so excited. I'm excited to hear that the training is happening in schools and colleges and stuff. I think it's just wonderful. It's not just these little groups doing their own thing, but it's giving just the fact that you guys are studying it in school gives it more credibility. It gives my work more credibility. So I'm excited.
Good.
That's great to hear.
All right. Well,
And good luck in your path.
thank you.
Yeah.
If you don't have anything else, I don't have anything else. So we'll call that an interview, and I'll figure out how to shut this thing down. And